Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows.
Hello, lovelies. I backed off a lot from covering politics on the channel and social issues on the channel, except where they did intersect with gaming. But I realise that that's a form of self-censorship because politics and related fields like history and communications, these are my special interests. And there is a lot of interesting shit going on right now around politics and history and communications. By which I mean the Trump trials and the UK election. So I ask that you show the same tolerance to me that I show to your expressions of your political and social beliefs. Otherwise, this whole thing is a nonsense. And I don't want it to be a nonsense. I like to think that my willingness to engage and talk and so on is a good thing and will be reciprocated. So, look, I just don't get it. I wonder what exactly it would take for people to properly wake up. I mean, the UK seems on a sort of surface level to be waking up from its Brexit and populist far-right fever dream. The Tories are finally going to be ousted. It seems all but certain that this will be the case. They'll likely be reduced to less than 100 MPs. I certainly hope so. But while there's always been a larger left-leaning majority in this country, that progressive force has been divided amongst parties that battle amongst each other. Even Labour is a kind of loose coalition of different political forces. And the problem is that on the opposite side, the Conservatives have tended to hang together. It has taken something like Brexit, like Liz Truss's kamikaze run on the UK economy. It's taken something like that to drive a wedge between different groups in the Conservatives and to turn them against each other. And even so, looking at the polling, there is a stubborn core of somewhere between 28 and 44% of people in the UK populace that still intends to vote for a right-wing party. It's just this split between the Conservatives and Reform, the Conservative corruption machine and gravy train, or Reform, who are out-and-out racists. They just wear suits and wax jackets. So they're the Conservatives still, just worse. And I refuse to believe that higher percentage of people in the UK are masochists. It doesn't seem particularly likely, and if it was true, then back in the day, my dating pool in the BDSM scene would have been a lot bigger. But it's baffling that many people will still vote for conservative, more broadly, small c conservative ideals and ideas, because the right wing has fucked it. And the Conservatives have been chasing the socially far right and the economy-destroying libertarian right for years now, and they fucked it. It's how we got Boris and Truss and Sunak, whose heart doesn't really seem to be in it particularly, but he's pursuing things like the stupid anti-immigration plan of flying a handful of asylum seekers at a time to Rwanda every once in a while, as if that's going to put people off from trying to come here. And we shouldn't be putting people off anyway. We need immigration, especially since Brexit. But this keeps happening, and the turkeys continue to vote for Christmas. I mean, the right wing has managed to exploit that socially conservative north particularly under Boris, getting them to vote against their own material interests in order to hypothetically punish some foreigners and to be mean to queer people. There seems to be something in people's psychology where they would rather see other people suffer than to have their own circumstances and those other people's circumstances get materially better in any way, shape or form. So sooner or later, material conditions matter again when things get bad enough, and they have finally gotten bad enough. So the Conservatives have fucked it, but they've always fucked it. It's just become more lazy and more obvious. The corruption, the nepotism, the corporate socialism. But what's our alternative? Keir Starmer's milquetoast Labour Party, which is like a Netflix remake of New Labour for modern audiences. I mean, they're better, or at least less bad than the right-wing parties, but in order to become electable, they've had to become virtually a right-wing party. And where's the ambition? Where are the things that we can vote for rather than just voting against the Conservatives? Why is it that we can't have nice things? That we can only ever slow the rot a bit for a couple of election cycles before the corrupt and criminal shower on the right wing comes back in? A lot of that is down to our first-past-the-post voting system, which distorts who and what gets into government. But that same corrupt system, that undemocratic system, is about to deliver the Labour Party a thumping majority of the sort that the Conservatives normally get, despite them still polling less than 50% of the overall vote. So there's no motivation for them to change us to a proportional representation system or even a single transferable vote system. Still, despite all that, as I said, the UK seems to be waking up out of its Brexit fever dream, but Nigel Farage is standing again, chief con man of Brexit, the used car salesman who sold many of the British people a lemon. And who still, commands support from a certain rump of the right wing who refused to acknowledge that they were conned. And that's the same across the Atlantic with Trump. A convicted felon, now a civilly liable rapist. Someone found guilty on all counts of what's widely considered to be the weakest case against him. An obvious con man, an obvious fraud. Even his own wife can't stand him. An idiot, a clown, who blew a $2 trillion hole in the US economy, who botched handling COVID, who made the US an international laughingstock and destabilised the situation around the world. And yet, this same hardcore group of at least 30% of people are idiots who will seemingly follow him off a cliff for a second time, having learned nothing the first time, even though he's now a convicted criminal. Worse, they will take the opposite lessons than they should take from what has happened here. They see a rich and powerful criminal being held to account, which speaks well, for once, of the US justice system, and yet they cry foul and seem to want to see him have special treatment and license to be an exception, to be able to get away with crimes. And since the immediate crisis of COVID eased, their conspiracist nonsense about it and their weird hatred of the people who actually helped despite Trump, like Fauci, has spun out of control unchecked because people don't feel like they need to fight them anymore. So it just spreads and gets worse and worse. Like the lager and racism meal deal that is the rump of the UK electorate, they seem to be far more interested in punishing other people rather than helping themselves or, God forbid, helping anyone else. They consistently vote against their own material interests. And it's even worse than the UK because the US Democrats are even less different from their Republicans than Labour is from the Tories, and yet they weirdly act as though the Democrats, a centre-right party that's probably more right-wing than the UK Conservatives, and they act as if they're Marxists. And none of this is helped by the fact that the bizarre creatures that wear left-wing philosophy like a skin suit are equally as obnoxious as the far-right lunatics, but maybe worse in that they don't actually reflect left-wing philosophy. And all they do is alienate people and turn them off from voting for anyone genuinely progressive rather than performatively progressive. I mean, we should all vote in a way that mitigates the damage that we're all facing. I think, at the end of the day, the alternative options aren't great, but they're better than the right-wing offering, or the more right-wing offering in the case of the United States. Yeah, we have to hold our nose and vote for the least worst candidate. But something's got to give, because least worst isn't enough, but we're not being offered good options. Our electoral systems, certainly in the US and UK, don't give us the option of voting with our hearts. In fact, it seems like all the Anglo democracies seem to be in need of some form of root and branch reform, but our electorates are too politically illiterate and gulled with bullshit to even know where to start. And those who do understand the system are too easily dismissed as a metropolitan elite or torn down with anti-intellectualism. And the powers that be have no reason to change anything. After all, this is the system that got them into power, so why would they want to change it? It's rotten. It's depressing. And watching people line up, aggressively asserting that they want to be conned for a second time by the likes of the equally odiously Batrachian Farage or Trump, it's just angst-inducing. Depressing. Any of you masochists? Do you Burgistanis want some insight into the UK elections and politics and what's going on over here to help you understand it? Or should I shut up, ignore my own education and interests, and just stick to games? Sang. Of course you can call me Daddy, and if you want to follow me on Facebook, you can find me at james.desborough, Postmortem Studios, all one word, JD Writer, and JGD Games.
It's time for you boys to share my last taste of the true black meat, flesh of the giant aquatic Brazilian centipede.